The summer heat pressed down hard on the old farm in Kansas, and Cole Matthews walked alone through the golden wheat fields that his grandfather had left him when he died last spring. And Cole had come back home after 15 years of working as a spacecraft engineer because he was tired and broken inside from his divorce, and he just wanted silence and peace. But the universe had other plans for him that night. He saw the smoke first rising up from the far end of the property, and then he saw the trench that something had carved through his wheat for nearly 1,000 feet. And at the end of that trench sat a ship unlike anything he had ever seen in all his years of building rockets and satellites, and the hull was made of some metal that shifted colors like oil on water, and strange crystals grew from its surface, and cracks ran along its side, leaking light that was not quite any color he could name. Cole walked toward it slowly, because he knew what machines could do when they were damaged, and he had seen enough explosions in his career to respect the danger. The hatch opened before he got close enough to touch it. Two figures stepped out into the Kansas twilight, and they were identical in almost every way, and they stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin pale as moonlight, and ears that swept back like the wings of birds, and hair that floated and moved like it was underwater, even though the air was perfectly still, and their eyes glowed softly with inner light, and one had eyes like amber honey, and the other had eyes like silver coins. Between them crawled a creature that made Cole stop breathing for a moment, and it was a dragon. There was no other word for it, with scales that shifted between purple and black, and wings folded tight against a body, long as a truck, and eyes like molten copper that watched Cole with intelligence that was clearly not animal. The amber-eyed one spoke first, and her voice did something strange to his chest, like music that vibrated in his bones. "Human," she said, "you will help us repair our vessel, or you will die with this world when they arrive." Cole looked at the damaged ship, and then at the dragon that was bleeding something like liquid starlight onto his soil, and then at the two alien women who looked like elves from old fairy tales, but carried themselves like soldiers who had seen too much war. "Who is coming?" he asked. The silver-eyed one answered, and her voice was colder than her sister. "The Hollow," she said, "and they consumed our empire and our people, and 12 billion souls are gone. And we are all that remains of the Sylvari Dominion." Cole felt something shift inside him, and it was the part of him that had always looked at broken things and wondered how to fix them, and he found himself walking toward the ship, already cataloging the damage in his mind and calculating what he would need. He did not know yet that this choice would change everything, and that these twin princesses from a dead civilization would become something far more complicated than refugees, and that the dragon, watching him with ancient copper eyes, had already begun to judge whether this human was worthy of their trust. The night grew darker around them, but Cole barely noticed, because he was already climbing into the ship and running his hands over systems that operated on principles he did not understand, but somehow felt familiar, like a language he had forgotten but was beginning to remember. The twins watched him work, and they exchanged a look that Cole did not see, and it was a look of surprise and curiosity, and something else that neither of them had felt in a very long time: hope. And far above them, hidden in the darkness between stars, something vast and hungry turned its attention toward a small blue planet that was making far too much noise, and it began to move. The amber-eyed twin was called Valith, and she watched Cole work on their ship with an expression that shifted between curiosity and something almost like wonder, and her sister Mirael stood guard at the entrance, with silver eyes scanning the horizon for threats that had not yet arrived. The dragon was named Ozrath, and Cole learned very quickly that Ozrath was not a pet when he accidentally touched Valith's arm to get her attention, and the dragon nearly burned him alive with a blast of violet fire that scorched the wall behind his head. "He is protective," Muriel observed without any emotion in her voice. And he does not trust your kind because your species broadcasts so much noise with your radio signals and your lights and your heat signatures, and you are like a beacon screaming into the void, and the Hollow will have heard you by now. Cole spent 18 hours every day inside the alien ship learning systems that worked in ways human science had never imagined, and the primary drive had collapsed during their escape from whatever nightmare they had fled, and it was something called a dimensional fold engine that bent space like folding cloth, and he could not fix that because he did not have the materials, but the backup systems were different, and they were mechanical and old by Sylvari standards, and they were something Cole could understand with his human hands and human mind. "You adapt quickly," Valeth said one night while she watched him trace a broken conduit with his fingers, and most species we encountered required generations to understand our most basic technology, and you have done it in days. "Humans are good with broken things," Cole muttered without looking up, "and we have spent our whole history breaking stuff and then figuring out how to put it back together again." "Is that why your world is so damaged?" Valeth asked, and she meant the pollution and the wars and the inequality that they had seen when scanning Earth from orbit. Cole paused for a long moment, and then he shrugged and said, "We are working on it." Mirael appeared in the doorway with news that made Cole's stomach drop, and she said, "The Hollow will arrive in approximately 47 of your planetary rotations, and if you cannot repair the dimensional drive, we will need an alternative plan." "What kind of alternative?" Cole asked. The twins looked at each other in a way that Cole could not read, and there was a whole conversation happening in that look that he was not part of. "Your species has something we have never encountered before," Valeth said carefully, "and it is a quality we cannot name in our language. And when we scanned your world from orbit, we detected it in your art and your music and even in your wars, and it was like a fire burning inside everything you create." "We thought it was primitive," Mirael added, "but now we wonder if it might be something else entirely." Cole went back to his work because he did not know what to say, and he was uncomfortable with the way they studied him like he was a puzzle they were trying to solve. He did not notice that Ozrath was watching too, and that the ancient dragon with copper eyes had begun to show something that might have been respect for this strange human who worked without rest to save beings he had just met. 3 weeks passed, and Cole managed to get the ship capable of flying through atmosphere, but the dimensional drive was beyond his ability to repair without materials that did not exist on Earth. "Show us your world." Valeth requested one evening, "and show us why the Hollow have not already found a species so loud." Cole took them flying at night with the ship cloaked in ways that made human stealth technology look like toys, and they saw the cities sprawling and chaotic and full of light, and they saw the wars on news screens, and the protests, and the art galleries and the hospitals where humans tried to save each other. They saw a mother shield her child from traffic without thinking, and a stranger give food to someone who was hungry, and an old man playing violin alone in a park at midnight for no audience but himself. "This makes no sense," Mirael whispered, "and your species destroys itself constantly, and you compete and hate and kill your own kind, and yet, they also do this." Valeth finished, and they build beauty from suffering, and they create connection from isolation. Ozrath made a low rumbling sound that Cole had learned meant agreement. The Hollow arrived 3 weeks early, and Cole saw them first on the television news, and they were black spheres appearing in the upper atmosphere, and they absorbed light and signal like holes in reality, and when the world governments fired missiles at them, the missiles simply vanished. "They test your defenses," Mirael said grimly, "and they learn, and then they consume." "How did you survive them?" Cole asked. The twins said nothing, but Ozrath spread his wings, and Cole saw the scars covering his scales, and there were thousands of them layered over each other, and those scales should have been impossible to damage. "We did not survive," Valeth finally answered, "and we ran because we were the only ones fast enough, and we ran while everyone else died." 12 billion, Cole repeated. 12 billion. 437 892,106. Miriel recited, and we counted every single one as they died, because it is our duty to remember them. Outside the ship, the sky was turning black with hollow spheres. Cole looked at the controls, and then at the twins, and then at the wounded dragon who had fought against impossible odds and lost everything, then let us stop running. He said Cole's plan was completely insane, and everyone told him so, and Valeth said it would never work, and Miriel called it the desperate gamble of a species too young to understand what they faced, and Ozrath communicated his doubts through a series of smoke rings that probably spelled out rude words in ancient Silvari. But it was also the only option they had left. "Your species has one advantage we did not," Cole explained while sketching diagrams on a tablet. "And you?" Silvari were all connected through a consciousness web, and the Hollow found that web and burned through it and consumed everyone at once. But humans are different because we are not connected to each other. There are nearly 8 billion of us, and every single one is a separate mind, with separate thoughts and separate will, and the Hollow cannot consume us the same way they consumed your people, because there is no central point to attack. You also cannot coordinate. Muriel countered, and your governments are already failing, and there is mass panic in the streets and riots breaking out, and your world will tear itself apart before the Hollow finish studying you. Maybe Cole admitted, but maybe that chaos is exactly what the Hollow cannot predict. He showed them the modifications he had made to their ship communication systems. And it was a broadcast array that could reach every screen and every speaker and every connected device on the entire planet. You want to tell them Valeth realized, and her amber eyes went wide with shock, and you want to reveal everything to your entire species. I want to give them a choice, Cole said, and your people never got that chance. The broadcast went out at midnight, and Cole's face appeared on every television and computer and phone on Earth, and beside him stood the twin alien princesses, and behind them, the massive form of Ozrath filled the screen. And Cole told humanity the truth about everything. He told them about the Silvari and their fallen empire, and he told them about the Hollow and what was coming, and he told them that Earth had maybe days before the attack began in earnest. And then he made a request, not for surrender and not for military action, but for something else entirely. And he asked every scientist and every engineer and every dreamer who had ever looked at the stars and wondered what was out there to come together and build something new. The response was exactly what the twins had predicted, and there was panic and denial and violence as people refused to believe what they were seeing. But there was also something else. Within 72 hours, a message came through on a hidden frequency that Cole had buried in the broadcast, and it was from a woman named Lucia Moreno, who was a physicist, hiding in a bunker beneath the mountains of Switzerland. "I have been studying the schematics you broadcast," Lucia said, "and the dimensional fold technology that powers their ship, and I think I understand how to reverse it." "Reverse it?" How Cole asked. "The Hollow travel through folds in space and time," she explained, "and they consume by converting matter into energy through those folds, but folds work both ways. And what if we folded them instead? And what if we gave them so much to consume that they could not stop eating until they collapsed?" Valeth leaned into the frame, and her face was pale even for her, and she said, "You are describing a dimensional collapse, and it would be like a black hole, but worse, and it would destroy everything within range. Not if we control where it collapses," Lucia said, "and not if we bait them into a trap of our own design." Cole looked at the twins and at Ozrath, who was listening with those ancient copper eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "The bait would need to be something they could not resist," Miriel said slowly, "and something that broadcasts consciousness like a beacon calling them in." Everyone turned to look at Cole. "Well," he said with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes, "I guess that is why you kept me around." Valeth reached out and touched his hand, and it was the first time she had touched him on purpose, and Ozrath did not try to burn him for it. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. "Yes, I do, Cole replied. And someone has to be the bait, and it might as well be someone who knows what he is getting into. The hollow spheres were descending now, and they were burning cities at random, testing humanity defenses and learning their weaknesses, and millions were already dead. Cole began preparing himself to die. The trap took 11 days to build, and every one of those days cost thousands of human lives as the Hollow continued their assault on Earth, and they burned cities and absorbed populations and learned more about humanity with every attack. But humanity learned, too. Lucia Moreno worked without sleep in her bunker, and she coordinated with scientists from every nation on Earth, and they were people who had spent their careers competing with each other for funding and recognition. And now they shared everything freely, because survival mattered more than pride. Cole trained with Valeth and Mirael, and they taught him how to broadcast his consciousness in a way the Hollow would find irresistible, and it hurt like nothing he had ever experienced, and it was like opening his mind and screaming into the void. "You are strong," Valeth told him after one session when he lay gasping on the floor of the ship, "and stronger than any human we have scanned. And there is something inside you that burns brighter than it should." Cole laughed weakly and said, "Maybe that is just stubbornness." Ozrath lowered his massive head and pressed his snout against Cole's chest, and it was a gesture of respect that the twins had never seen him offer to anyone outside their family. "He has accepted you," Mirael said with wonder in her silver eyes, "and in 10,000 years he has never accepted an outsider." Cole reached up and scratched the dragon behind his ear ridge, and Ozrath made a rumbling sound like a mountain purring. The day of the trap arrived too quickly, and Cole stood at the center of a device that Lucia had built using silvery technology and human innovation, and it was ugly and improvised and held together with welding and prayer, but the math said it would work. 17 million humans had volunteered to broadcast alongside him, and they were scattered across the planet in similar devices, and each one knew they might not survive, but they had chosen to stand anyway. "For Earth," one of them said over the communication channel, and it became a chant that spread across the network. "For Earth," the voices repeated, "and for everyone we have lost and for everyone who comes." After Cole closed his eyes and opened his mind, and he screamed into the void with everything he had, the Hollow came. They came faster than the twins had predicted, and they came in greater numbers than anyone had feared, and they rushed toward the beacon of human consciousness like starving creatures toward food, and they began to consume. But Lucia Trap activated at the perfect moment, and the dimensional folds began to reverse, and instead of the Hollow consuming humanity, it was the folds consuming the Hollow, and they tried to stop eating, but they could not, because that was not in their nature, and they folded inward on themselves again and again, until they became nothing at all. The sky burned with light that was not light, and reality twisted in ways that human eyes could not process, and Cole felt himself being pulled toward the collapse. And he knew he was going to die, and he accepted it because it was worth it. Then something grabbed him and yanked him backward through the chaos, and it was Ozrath with his claws wrapped around Cole's body, and the dragon flew faster than physics should have allowed, and he carried Cole away from the collapse just as it swallowed the last of the Hollow. Cole woke up in the ship 3 days later, with Valeth pressing her hand to his forehead, and Mirael monitoring machines that tracked his vital signs, and both of them had tears on their pale cheeks. "You are remarkably difficult to kill," Mirael observed, but her voice cracked on the last word. "Human stubbornness," Cole managed to say. The world was different now, and 4 million of the volunteers had died, including Cole's friend Lucia, who had stayed at her console until the very end to make sure the eye trap worked perfectly, and humanity mourned them as heroes. But the Hollow were gone, and Earth had survived, and somewhere across the galaxy, other fragments of the Hollow swarm would learn what had happened here, and they would know that this small blue planet was no longer easy prey. Cole stood at the window of the ship and watched the sun rise over his grandfather's farm, and the wheat fields were burned and scarred, but already green shoots were pushing up through the ash. Valeth came to stand beside him, and she was close enough that he could feel the strange coolness of her skin. "Your people saved themselves," she said, "and we thought we would have to save you, but you saved yourselves." Cole shook his head and said, "We saved each other, and that is what humans do." Ozrath landed outside the ship, and his copper eyes found Cole through the window, and there was something in that ancient gaze that looked like pride. 6 months had passed since the day the Hollow died above Earth, and the world was slowly healing from wounds that would take generations to fully mend, and Cole stood in his grandfather wheat field watching new stalks grow tall and golden under the summer sun. The twins stood beside him as they often did now, and Valeth's amber eyes reflected the sunlight like honey, and Muriel's silver gaze swept the horizon with the eternal vigilance of a warrior who had lost everything once and refused to lose again. Ozrath lay coiled behind them, and his massive body created a wall of purple-black scales, and his copper eyes were half-closed in contentment as the warmth soaked into his ancient bones. The sky was different now, and it was full of ships from 12 different worlds, and they were refugees and survivors and others who had run from the Hollow and found nowhere safe to hide until they heard what happened on Earth, and now they had come seeking shelter and alliance and hope. "Your people are building a fleet," Valeth said quietly, "and they are using the designs your scientist created and scaling them up, and soon they will have ships that can fold space and carry weapons that can threaten even the remaining Hollow swarms. We are good at building things," Cole replied, "and especially when we have something worth protecting." Muriel stepped closer to him, and her silver eyes found his, and there was something vulnerable in her expression that he had never seen before. "You could come with us," she said, "and we could leave this world together and travel the stars and help rebuild what the Hollow destroyed. And there is so much work to be done, and so many lost civilizations that need someone to remember them." Cole's heart beat faster, but he did not answer yet because he knew Muriel was not finished. Or Valeth added as she moved to his other side, "And we could stay here with you, and we could learn more about this quality your species possesses and this fire that burns inside everything you create. And we have lived for thousands of years, but we have never encountered anything like humanity before." Ozrath lifted his head and made a sound that vibrated through the earth, and it was a sound of approval and acceptance. And Cole realized that the dragon had been waiting for this moment. "We are asking," Valeth said, and her voice was soft and uncertain in a way that princesses of fallen empires were not supposed to be, "and we are asking if you would stay with us, and forever is a very long time by your species measure. But we are patient, and we are willing to wait." Cole looked at the sky full of ships carrying survivors from across the galaxy, and he looked at the wheat field that his grandfather had loved, and he looked at the twins who had lost everything and somehow found him, and he looked at the dragon who had fought gods and chosen to protect a human mechanic from Kansas. He thought about Lucia who had died saving the world, and about the 17 million volunteers who had screamed into the void beside him, and about everyone who had been lost and everyone who remained. And he thought about forever. It was a long time by human measure, and he would grow old while the twins remained young and beautiful, and he would eventually die while they lived on for millennia more, but somehow that did not seem to matter because forever was not about living without end, and forever was about choosing to spend whatever time you had with the people who mattered. And Cole had learned that lesson the hard way when his marriage fell apart, and when his grandfather died alone, and when he almost died saving the world. Forever sounds like a good start. He said Valeth smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise, and Muriel laughed, and it was the first time he had ever heard her laugh, and Ozrath spread his wings and roared with joy that echoed across the Kansas plains. Cole took both their hands in his, and he did not know what the future held, and he did not know if he was making the right choice. But he knew that he was making his choice, and that was what mattered. Above them, the stars burned with possibility, and somewhere out there, the remaining hollow lurked and plotted and feared. The small blue planet that had taught the universe how to fight back. And in a wheat field in Kansas, a human mechanic stood with two alien princesses and their dragon, and together they watched the beginning of something new. "This is not the end," Valeth whispered. "No," Cole agreed, "and this is just the beginning." And it was.